The wind crept low across Ever-Hollow Cemetery, rustling the brittle leaves that clung stubbornly to the boughs above. A steady overcast muted the afternoon sky, casting the entire place in shades of ash and silver. Cameron Blackwell stood at the foot of the grave with the weight of marble and memory pressing down on his chest. The polished black stone bore the names carved in pristine lettering, Elizabeth Grace Blackwell, and beneath it, Baby Blackwell, forever loved, never held. He bent to lay white lilies, Elizabeth's favorite. Every second Thursday, he came, with the same bouquet, same ritual, same silence. The only constant in a life that had unraveled in luxury-lined solitude. He crouched down, brushing the leaves from the base of the stone with mechanical care. "Hi, Liz," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's me, again, still." He trailed off, the rest swallowed by the hush that blanketed the cemetery. "I closed that Singapore deal. Doesn't matter much. You'd hate what they did to the atrium." A dry chuckle, more breath than laughter. "Sometimes I wonder if they know I'm bluffing, that I haven't felt sure of anything since I lost you." His voice cracked, and he fell into silence. Just him, the lilies, and the echo of a future that never was. A flicker of motion in the corner of his eye broke the stillness. Across the path, maybe 5 plots down, for girls huddled together in front of a smaller, newer grave. Their clothes hung off them in tired layers, mismatched, oversized, torn at the seams. One of the older ones smoothed a blanket of wildflowers over the grave, arranging them with care that no child her age should have to master. The smallest, no older than 7, knelt barefoot in the cold grass, her wild honey blonde curls bouncing as she laughed at something. One of the others said. She turned and spotted him. Before he could look away, she waved, a full-bodied, unself-conscious wave, as if she were greeting a neighbor from across the yard. Cameron blinked, unsure how to respond. He gave a slight nod, expecting them to turn away. Instead, the oldest girl stood, brushed off her knees, and approached him. Her expression was cautious, her jaw set with practiced poise. Behind her trailed the other 3, stepping carefully among the graves like they belonged in this place. "We didn't mean to bother you," the eldest said. Her dark auburn hair was tied back with a fraying ribbon. Her voice was clear, calm, tired. "Our mom always said people who are sad visit the quiet places." Cameron tilted his head. "Who are you visiting?" She pointed to the modest stone behind them. "Our mom, Celeste Harper." Her eyes met his, searching for something. "A name." She said someone kind might find us here. His heart caught some strange rhythm folding inside his chest. "Kind," he muttered, more to himself than to them. "Not a word most would use for me." A smaller hand nudged past him. The quietest girl, with dark eyes and moon-pale skin, stepped forward. She said nothing. Instead, she held up a folded scrap of paper. Cameron hesitated, then took it. It was a drawing, crude, childlike, but unmistakable. A tall man in a black coat standing over a grave, white lilies in his hands. Above him, a haloed woman floated in the sky, scrawled beneath in shaky pencil. "He still loves." His throat constricted. "Who drew this?" he asked. "That's my sister Daisy," the older girl said. "She's the artist." The smallest girl beamed, her cheeks red from the cold. "She says your angel talks to our mom now. They drink sun tea." Cameron didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, words abandoned him. He stared at the drawing, then asked the girls in a voice barely more than a whisper, "What do you want most right now?" There was a pause, then the other twin sharper features. Wary eyes stepped forward. "Not to be forgotten," she said, blunt and bitter. "That'd be nice." The words cut through him like glass. He hadn't cried since the night Elizabeth died. Not when he signed the death certificate. Not at the funeral. Not on all those long, empty anniversaries. But now surrounded by 4 barefoot girls who wore their grief like coats to sizes to big Cameron, Blackwell felt something crack. A tear slipped down his cheek, tracing a path he had long thought sealed shut. They stood there, a circle of strangers bound by absence. And for the first time in a decade, he wasn't alone. The rain had begun to whisper against the penthouse windows by the time Cameron Blackwell got home. But he didn't notice. The city stretched out beneath him like a glittering lie, all sharp edges and neon illusions. He stood still in his living room, the silence pressing against his skin like a second suit. The drawing sat on a marble counter, creased and smudged, still radiating an innocence that shouldn't have been possible in this world. "He still loves," He hadn't said those words aloud in years. He poured a glass of bourbon too much, too fast, but even the burn did nothing to numb the sensation rising in his chest. It wasn't grief exactly, it was movement. Something shifting, something waking. He didn't sleep. Instead, by 3 a.m., he was on his laptop with a determined scowl and bloodshot eyes. His assistant, Lorraine, would wake up to a flurry of emails, cemetery records, child services contact lists, background search authorizations. One name appeared in the digital shadows, Celeste Harper. Her file was thin, alarmingly thin. No next of kin, no employer listed in the last 3 years. Cause of death, late-stage lymphoma. The address on record was a condemned tenement on the south side already marked for demolition. Beneath it, one line from a hospice volunteers. Intake notes, patient asked if final arrangements could be near the Blackwell plot. Said she wanted her daughters to have a chance at being found. Cameron's chest constricted. That morning, he went back. Ever Hollow Cemetery was quiet again. The sky washed clean by dawn's pale light, and they were there like ghosts, waiting for the living to show up. The girls were crouched around their mother's grave. Daisy humming softly, Luna pressing flower petals into a pattern in the dirt. Hazel spotted him first and stood defensively, shielding her sisters in a subtle, practiced move. Ivy narrowed her eyes, unconvinced. "You came back," Hazel said. Not a question, a judgment. Cameron walked slowly toward them. "I needed to ask more than one question." Ivy scoffed. "That's what people always want. More." He stopped, a few feet away. "I read about your mom. I knew her, once, a long time ago. She worked at one of my buildings. She sent me a letter, years back. I didn't answer it." Hazel's face didn't change. "You waited until she was dead to care." That hit harder than it should have. He looked down at the little ones. Daisy was drawing again. Luna was silent, but her eyes never left his face. "Where are you staying?" he asked. Hazel didn't respond, but Ivy barked, "Why do you care?" "Because your mother did," Cameron replied, his voice low. "And because maybe I should have sooner." Hazel looked at him, something fragile flickering behind her guarded expression. She said nothing. Instead, she turned and walked away, expecting her sisters to follow. They didn't. Daisy walked up to him, tiny palm opening to reveal another folded piece of paper. A house, windows glowing yellow, surrounded by flowers. All 6 of them stood in front of it. A real home, someday. She drew that this morning. Ivy muttered behind him. "So you were in it." "I told her she was dumb." "She's not," Cameron said softly, unfolding the paper with trembling fingers. "She's hopeful. That's not dumb. That's brave." Behind him, Hazel finally spoke. "We're staying in an old church shelter, but only for one more night. After that, they're full." Cameron knelt down, meeting Daisy's eyes. "Would you trust me enough to have lunch?" he asked. "Just lunch? Somewhere warm." Hazel's gaze sharpened. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Cameron said, "but maybe a beginning." He stood again, taller now, not just physically. Something in him was different. Hazel didn't answer, but after a long pause, she gave the smallest nod. At a corner diner that smelled like cinnamon and rusted booths, they ordered pancakes and grilled cheese. The waitress gave them strange looks for dirty-faced girls sitting across from a man in a tailored suit, but the girls devoured everything like they hadn't eaten in days. Because they hadn't. While Luna traced her finger along the condensation on her glass, Ivy talked about how they'd been couch surfing since their mother died, how the system forgot about them, how their mom had been too proud to beg for help, and how Hazel kept them together. Hazel, who just stared at her plate, chewing slowly. She kept saying someone would come, Ivy said, pushing crumbs around with her fork, that there were still good people in the world, like her friend from a long time ago. "She never said your name," she said. Daisy interrupted. "That someone with sad eyes would remember us." Cameron stared at her. "She said that every night." Hazel murmured finally. "She said if we ever found him he'd know who we were." A silence stretched between them, filled only by the sizzle of grease and clink of silverware. Then Luna reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a slip of paper. She didn't speak, just handed it to him. It was a photograph, old, faded. Younger Celeste, smiling, her arm around a woman Cameron hadn't seen in 15 years. Elizabeth, his wife. The caption on the back read, "Sisters of the Heart. If I go first, find him." His vision blurred. Everything, his grief, his silence, his avoidance had come full circle to this moment. You knew my wife, he whispered. Hazel nodded. She gave us your name, but we didn't believe her. Cameron folded the photograph carefully, like it might break. Well, he said, voice low and shaken. Now we all know the truth. And then he stood. I'm not leaving you out here again. This time, none of them objected. Not even Hazel, not even Ivy. And for the first time, Luna smiled. The penthouse had never felt more like a lie. Glass walls, sculpted granite counters, and $1,000 furniture lined up like exhibits in a museum built to impress no one. It had been designed as a fortress of solitude for a man who needed to feel untouchable. But now, as Cameron Blackwell opened the door and watched for cautious girls step across the marble threshold, the silence inside shattered in an entirely new way. Hazel stood still in the doorway, like she expected an alarm to go off just because she breathed aloud. Ivy lingered behind her, scowling at the polished floors like they offended her. Daisy, padded in on socked feet, spinning slowly, eyes wide with wonder, and Luna ever silent clung to her sister's hand, her gaze fixed on a crystal sculpture that looked like it cost more than their mother's hospital. Bill's Doc Cameron cleared his throat. It's not much, but it's safe. Ivy snorted. Safe like a museum. You sure were allowed to touch anything. Hazel gave her a warning glance, but Cameron only nodded. Everything in here exists to be used, except the espresso machine. That one's trying to kill me. No one laughed. He guided them toward the guest bedrooms, each fully furnished, pristine, and untouched. Pick whichever you want. There's 4, but you can share, or not. We always share, Hazel said automatically, scanning the hall, like she was expecting someone to snatch the offer away. Then make yourselves comfortable, Cameron said, stepping back. But the girls didn't move. Instead, Hazel asked the question that had been lurking beneath her composed silence all day. What happens after tonight? The honesty in the question left no room for platitudes. Cameron hesitated. I don't know yet. I just know I'm not leaving you out there, and you're not going back to that shelter. You say that now. Ivy muttered. People say things all the time, then they leave. Hazel didn't speak, but her eyes said it all. We've heard promises before. They rot just as fast as flowers on a grave. He didn't blame them. Your mom mattered to me, Cameron said, steady, more than I ever realized. And if I can do something right by her memory, this is it. But I won't force you to trust me. The tension broke slightly. Hazel gave a quiet nod. Ivy said nothing, but she didn't argue. Daisy wandered into the nearest room and squealed over the view. That night, after an awkward dinner, 3 different kinds of pasta, none of them, right? The girls piled into one room, refusing the idea of sleeping apart. Cameron stood in the hallway, listening to the muffled laughter through the door, Daisy's giggles, Ivy's sarcasm, Hazel telling them to hush, Luna's quiet humming. It was the first real sound of life in this place in years. But as he turned to go, Hazel appeared in the doorway. Don't take this the wrong way, she said, eyes sharp. But we're only here because we don't have another choice. Cameron nodded slowly. That's fair. We're not your charity case, she added. Don't treat us like broken toys. We're people. I know, he said quietly. She started to go, then hesitated. I'm not saying we won't leave if we have to. I'm saying we've done it before. We can do it again. Then she closed the door. Cameron stood there a long time, listening to the sounds of their new, uncertain normal. In his office, he poured himself a drink and sat at his desk, staring at an untouched folder that Lorraine had overnighted. CEL, Project Archive, Celeste Harbor Files. He opened it, expecting contracts and employment records. What he found was a single handwritten letter on floral stationery. Cameron, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and my girls have found their way to you. I don't know how, but I hope they might. You may not remember me, we only spoke once, but I never forgot the man who signed a Christmas bonus without knowing to pay for my daughters. Delivery room, _ you build things, beautiful things, towers, skylines. But can you build something invisible, something lasting? Can you build a home with love, not glass? If you can, you'll save them, and maybe yourself too. Celeste, _ his hands trembled. The woman he barely knew, the mother of these 4 girls, she planned for this. She had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself, and he was just now understanding what that meant. Later that night, He walked past their door again. Light peeked out beneath it, flickering. Daisy must have left the lamp on. He was about to turn it off when a soft sound stopped him. Luna singing. It was a broken lullaby, cracked by emotion, but sweet, clear, fragile as snow melting in sunlight. And it was enough to crack something deep inside him. For a moment, he leaned against the door, letting it hold him upright. The penthouse was no longer his refuge. It was their shelter, their test, their hope. In the morrow, he would find out just how far he'd go to protect them. He didn't know it yet, but something dangerous was already watching, waiting, digging into legal records, breathing down his neck in the form of a man who still claimed ownership of the girls. Like they were paychecks instead of people, Victor Harper was about to make his next move, and Cameron Blackwell would be ready. Or so he thought. The knock came just past midnight. Sharp, deliberate, unwelcome. Cameron Blackwell had been at his desk in the dim light of his office, still reading Celeste's letter for the 10th time. Each word, especially those written in her gently looping script, had carved a deeper mark into his conscience. He was halfway through drafting a guardianship petition when the knock echoed again. He paused. No one ever knocked on his penthouse door. Not this late. Not ever. He checked the monitor. A man stood in the hallway, disheveled, unshaven, eyes that burned red around the edges, rage and liquor swirling behind them. His coat hung open like he'd been sleeping in it for days, and one shoe was untied. But there was no mistaking him. Victor Harper, the man who legally still claimed the girls. The man who disappeared after Celeste's funeral only to resurface when he smelled opportunity or a threat. Cameron opened the door halfway. You're trespassing. Victor's lips curled upward. And you're kidnapping. The words were like ice water down Cameron's spine. Not because they were true, but because, legally, they might look like it. Victor pushed forward slightly, testing the boundary. I know who you are, Mr. Blackwell, he said with mocking civility. The billionaire with a dead wife and no kids. So when I saw that my stepdaughters were suddenly staying in your glass castle, I started asking questions. Cameron didn't blink. You're drunk. Not drunk enough to forget the law. Victor snapped. You took them from a shelter. You didn't go through channels. That makes you look real bad, especially when you don't have any blood rights. You're not their father, Cameron said, calm but deadly. You're not even a guardian. You vanished. You let them starve. Victor shrugged. No one can prove that. But what they can prove is that you have no business housing someone else's kids without permission. The standoff stretched between them, a coiled spring of tension. Cameron's voice dropped. If you cared about them, you'd know Luna hasn't spoken since their mother died. That Daisy is malnourished. That Hazel keeps one eye on the exit at all times. And Ivy's a spitfire. Victor interrupted, grinning, just like her mama. That was it. Cameron stepped forward, closing the distance between them with lethal calm. Get out. Victor leaned in, the stink of cigarettes and bourbon swirling around him. You think money can erase the law, Blackwell? Think again. I've already filed a report. They'll come for you, maybe not tonight, but soon. He turned and swaggered off, whistling a broken tune down the hallway. Cameron shut the door and locked it, then bolted it, then stood there, hand clenched against the frame. He didn't move for a full minute. Upstairs, Hazel sat on the stairwell, hugging her knees. She'd heard everything. She didn't speak, just looked at him. He finally turned to her, his face hollow, but determined. We're going to fight this. Hazel didn't ask what this was. She knew. In the following days, everything changed. The air in the penthouse grew heavier, not from dread, but from the weight of decisions being made in secret. James, Cameron's attorney and lifelong friend, arrived with legal documents and investigators. School applications were paused. Therapist appointments increased. Background checks ran overnight like a current humming beneath their lives. And Victor, he didn't disappear. He lingered like smoke. One day Ivy saw him parked across the street, watching. Another day, Daisy pointed to a man snapping photos from the park across from their school. Cameron filed a restraining order, denied. He pushed for emergency custody, delayed. The system, slow and creaking, moved with all the urgency of molasses uphill. But worst of all was what Victor did next. He filed for full custody. He presented documents poorly forged but plausible that painted him as a grieving stepfather, trying to reclaim the only family he had left. Pictures of the girls in earlier years, smiling in holiday sweaters, Statements from former neighbors who barely remembered him but owed him favors. A video where he choked out tears on command and blamed wealthy predators for exploiting his girls. Cameron stared at the footage on James' tablet. He's trying to turn this into a public war. James muttered, "He's painting me as the villain," Cameron said quietly. James nodded, "And people love to tear down a billionaire. But I don't care what they think of me," Cameron said. "I care what the judge thinks." James looked at him carefully. "You also care what they think. Hazel, Ivy, the little ones. You're scared they'll stop trusting you." Cameron didn't deny it. That night, the girls were unusually quiet. Ivy had her arms wrapped around Daisy, who was drawing less and sleeping more. Luna hadn't left Hazel's side in 2 days. Cameron walked in with a box. Hazel sat up from the couch. "What's that?" He set it on the table. "It's everything I have on your mom. Her drawings, her work history, old messages, pictures, some of them with my wife. They were friends. I didn't know until recently. But I think she meant for us to find each other." Hazel's face shifted. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because I need you to know I'm not just fighting for you to stay here," he said, voice steady. "I'm fighting because I should have done more for her, and I won't make that mistake twice." Hazel looked at the photographs. Her mom and Elizabeth, laughing, young, free. "I didn't think anyone really saw her," she said. "I did," Cameron said softly. "Too late. But now, I see all of you. And you're not going back to that man." She nodded slowly, but the war had already begun, and the battlefield would be the courtroom. Where lies wear suits, and truth bleeds slowly. The courtroom was cold not just from the hum of the overworked air conditioning, but from the sterile distance of the law itself. It wasn't built for grief, or guilt, or the soft, desperate beating of a child's heart. It was built for statements, procedures, and arguments stacked on legal precedent. And today, that coldness was going to decide the fate of fragile lives. Cameron Blackwell sat at the plaintiff's table in a dark navy suit, hair swept back, hands folded tightly on the polished oak. The courtroom was packed. Press had gotten wind of the billionaire guardianship battle, and now every row buzzed with whispers and lenses. But none of that mattered to him. Only the four girls mattered. Hazel sat beside him, dressed in black, slacks and a pressed white shirt, her hair pulled back like armor. Ivy sat to rows behind, tapping her foot, visibly twitching with nervous energy. Daisy held tightly to Luna's hand, who hadn't spoken a word since the judge entered. At the defense table, Victor Harper. He cleaned up well, trimmed beard, polished shoes, a cheap but convincing suit. His eyes scanned the room like a man auditioning for sainthood. He whispered to his attorney, smiled at the reporters, and held a folded photograph of the girls in his hand, an old one, taken before Celeste's illness. He printed it big, put it in a glossy folder, as if to remind everyone, "I knew them." First, Judge Rowan was known for her sharp mind and sharper questions. She tapped the gavel lightly and began. "We are here today for the emergency hearing on the matter of temporary guardianship and contested custody of minors Hazel, Ivy, Daisy, and Luna Harper. Petitioning guardian, Cameron Blackwell." Victor's lawyer was the first to rise. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Blackwell removed the girls from a licensed shelter without legal process, housed them in his private residence, and is now attempting to adopt them under what we consider suspicious emotional manipulation." Cameron's attorney, James, cut in with ice in his tone. "And we have documented evidence that Mr. Harper abandoned the children for 6 months, left them in substandard living conditions, and only reappeared when the mother's unclaimed inheritance and guardianship rights became relevant." Victor stood suddenly. "That's a damn lie." Judge Rowan slammed her gavel. "You'll have your time, Mr. Harper. Sit down." Victor glared at Cameron across the aisle. James continued, "We also have medical reports detailing Daisy's malnourishment, Luna's PTSD diagnosis, Ivy's anxiety, and Hazel's forced role as legal guardian in practice, though not in name." The judge nodded. "Let's hear from the children." Hazel was called first. The courtroom fell silent as the 13-year-old walked to the stand, took the oath, and sat stiffly upright. Her eyes flicked toward Cameron only once. Then she faced the judge. "Hazel, can you tell us where you were living before Mr. Blackwell found you? In an old church shelter. Before that, in a motel. Before that, on the floor of Victor's apartment. And what was life like there?" Hazel's voice did not tremble. "He drank a lot, came home angry, We had to hide sometimes. Victor's lawyer objected. No documented history of abuse, Hazel interrupted, eyes flashing. Because no one came to look. Judge Rowan raised an eyebrow. Continue. He took my mom's money, the inheritance, said it was for taking care of us. But he didn't. I raised my sisters. There was a beat of silence, a ripple of something raw. The next witness was Ivy Dodge. She came in like a thunderstorm, barely restrained. I don't care what paperwork he has, she spat. He wasn't there when Mom died. He wasn't there when Daisy fainted from hunger. He wasn't there when Luna stopped speaking. You know who was there? Hazel. And now, Cameron. Judge Rowan leaned forward. And who is Cameron Blackwell to you? Ivy's voice softened just a fraction. He's the first adult who didn't promise and disappear. He came back. He stayed. Then came Daisy. She didn't speak at all. She walked to the judge and handed her a drawing. 6 people, all holding hands under a sky full of stars. A little girl with flowers in her hair pointed at a tall man and a silver-haired woman in the sky. I asked the stars for a dad, she said simply. They sent Mr. Blackwell. That's when Victor made his move. He stood, without permission, waving a document. Your Honor, I'd have evidence that the girl's mother confessed to fraud. She forged my name on insurance papers. I've submitted the letter and a video file. This proves she was unstable. Cameron's eyes narrowed. That letter is a fake. Victor smirked. Oh, how would you know? Because the real evidence was in her safety deposit box, James snapped, rising from his chair. Your Honor, I'd like to submit the actual recordings, the originals dated and time-stamped, in which Mr. Harper admits to forging Sellers' signature on every financial document. Judge Rowan motioned the bailiff. James plugged in. The room fell silent as the courtroom played audio of Victor's voice. They'll never know. Kids don't read legal crap. I'll keep it all: her life insurance, the rent she prepaid, their meal tickets. That's all. Hell, I can sell the oldest to some charity full with a guilt complex. The room erupted. Victor turned pale. That's not me, that's AI. Judge Rowan banged her gavel. Her expression unreadable. We'll authenticate the audio. A preliminary forensic watermarking matches the original date and location. Victor slumped back into his chair. The final blow came from the most unlikely source. Luna. The courtroom held its breath as the silent child walked forward on her own. Daisy tried to follow, but Luna shook her head. She stood at the witness stand. The judge said gently, "You don't have to speak," but Luna did. Her voice, small but clear, carried through the quiet like a bell. "Please, let us stay." He gave. U.S. light again. That was all, but it was enough. Judge Rowan looked over the sea of tense, waiting faces. "I am granting Mr. Blackwell full emergency guardianship effective immediately. Permanent custody hearings will proceed, but for now, the children will remain in his care and out of Mr. Harper's reach." Victor exploded in a tirade that had to be cut short by security. As he was dragged from the courtroom, his final words echoed like venom. "They're not your kids, Blackwell. They'll never be yours." But Cameron, surrounded by four brave girls, Hazel's trembling breath, Ivy's proud smirk, Daisy's radiant grin, and Luna's tiny hand in his knew the truth. They already were. Spring had returned with a vengeance. The city wore green like a promise. Trees bloomed shamelessly. Sidewalk flower vendors shouted over traffic, and the skyline shimmered beneath a sun that felt a little warmer than it had in years. But on the rooftop garden of the Blackwell Foundation, the air was filled not with corporate jargon or real estate deals, but with music, laughter, and something sacred. Family. The girls had chosen to call it Family Day, not an anniversary of legality, but of transformation. 1 year to the day since Cameron Blackwell found 4 wildflower-hearted girls at a grave. 1 year since he'd learned how to breathe again. A small crowd gathered, friends, teachers, therapists, reporters, and the quietly powerful allies Cameron had learned to embrace in this new life. They weren't here for headlines. They were here for sisters who'd become daughters, and one broken man who'd become a father. Hazel stood at the podium first. 14 now, stronger, still guarded, but not impenetrable. She adjusted the mic like a seasoned speaker. "A year ago, we didn't think family could mean anything other than loss. That we met him." She looked at Cameron, who stood near the back, his tie forgotten, his eyes wet. "He didn't rescue us. We weren't waiting to be saved, but he saw us. He listened, and he stayed. That changed everything." Applause followed. Ivy rolled her eyes dramatically as she stepped up, but her grin betrayed her pride. I still don't trust Soups. She started, but I trust this one. She pointed at Cameron, even though he sucks at cooking. Laughter rippled across the crowd. Ivy continued, her tone softening. Mom said family was about who you choose to protect. He chose us, and we chose him back. Then Daisy came up, dragging Luna by the hand. We made something, she whispered, holding up a picture. 6 people, hand in hand. This one with colored chalk. Real sky, real stars. In the center, Sarah, Cameron's late wife, and Celeste, their mom. Together, watching over them, Doc Cameron stepped forward, took the mic, hands trembling slightly. I spent most of my life building things, glass towers, steel monuments, but none of it mattered. Not really. Not until I met for girls who made me tear it all down. He looked at each of them. I didn't think I'd ever get to be a father again. I didn't think I deserved to. But they made me one, and I'm better because of it. He reached into his coat and pulled out 5 velvet boxes. Today, I'm giving each of you this locket. Inside is a picture of your mother and one of my wife. Because both of them made us who we are. The girls stepped forward to accept. Them, tears in their eyes. But just as Cameron turned to step away, James approached with a weathered manila envelope. I found this, he said softly. It was hidden in an archived Blackwell project file, marked for C. Blackwell. Deliver only if custody succeeds. Cameron opened it slowly, his hands beginning to shake. Inside was a letter from Celeste. Dear Cameron, if you're reading this, then something truly miraculous happened. You found them, and they found you. What you may not know is that you saved me long before you ever met them. That Christmas bonus you gave me when I worked the front desk, it paid for a hospital visit that caught my lymphoma early. It bought us time for birthdays, for first words, for laughter. Elizabeth once told me you were made of stone and fire, and I told her fire could light or destroy. But when it finds the right people, it warms them forever. If you are their father now, then know this, you were always meant to be, not because of blood, but because you didn't walk away. Tell Hazel she's stronger than her fear. Tell Ivy, sarcasm isn't armor, it's a secret hope. Tell Daisy the world needs her softness, and Luna, she will speak when she feels safe, and she will speak loudly. And you, Cameron, stop punishing yourself. You don't owe the world penance. You owe it joy. Now go give them the world. And if there's ever a day you wonder if you're enough, read this again. Love always, Celis to Cameron. Folded the letter, his hands trembling, tears tracing silent lines down his face. He turned to the girls. I didn't just find you, he said. You found me too. Hazel nodded slowly, emotion breaking through her practiced calm. She stepped forward, wrapped her arms around him. One by one, Ivy, Daisy, and Luna joined. The hug was messy, imperfect, real. The applause didn't matter. The cameras didn't matter. Only this. Later, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Cameron stood alone beside the headstones in the memorial garden of Elizabeth Grace Blackwell, Celeste Marie Harper. Daisies bloomed between them, wild and resilient. I kept my promise. He whispered, and so did you. He turned back toward the rooftop, where for girls waited, no longer homeless, no longer lost as he joined them. Again, the photographer snapped a picture, their annual family day portrait. 6 people, 1 family. Found, not lost. And the future, it had just begun.